A little video on this Utilitech can lighting. They call it recessed, recessed lighting or baffle recessed lighting kit. Little halogen bulbs, pretty low voltage for each one. The thing you got to look out for on the entire circuit is you're probably going to be running more than one on each circuit. So each one of these is 50 watts. So running 6 of these is 300 watts. You're going to make sure we're using real wire on this. So I'm using 14.2, although I think it's 14.2 that goes throughout this. And if I've got a single going off to the side, I'm going a little skinnier than that. But the way this stuff works is it does require hard wiring, although it's basic light fixture stuff. What makes it different from, let's say, an external fixture, and this is where we're replacing a larger one with a smaller one, so there's got to be a lot of repair going on here. The can lighting really requires you to have access to the other side. There are ways to do it without getting access to the other side. It's just a major hassle to fish wires through. But on these Utilitech ones, they all come with a little template. You kind of break that out of the box. You set that up there. You cut your hole. There's a good little margin of error because of the rims on these things. And it's kind of a multi-piece deal. So what you do is this is what you receive in the box. You pop the side cover off. It's a no tools, spring-loaded type thing. You'll see pretty conventional light gauge, light wires in there. A black and a white, and of course a bare ground, which just goes to the housing. So we're not going to use a wire nut on that ground. We're just going to twist it, make sure it's well connected. The way these work is you get the hole and everything goes up and it will all fit through that hole. See how that goes? Now when we pass it through the hole, these little things we just kind of pinch in so that it goes through. But if it gives us a problem, we pop the lower section off, and we're going to pop that off, and then we pass it through the hole with that stuff pinched out. Now it's easier for me to show it with one that's apart. So basically this thing just kind of pops out spring loaded on those little things. So with that removed, when we push this through the hole, these will collapse in. With that held up in the hole, what you do is we reach into the inside. You see how there's notches on all that stuff? You're going to reach in there and just kick that out until it goes here. Now if you end up needing a little more spring tension on that, or you're mounting it on a thinner surface, while you're reaching in there, you can draw that down and feed it to some of these other notches. It'll give you more spring tension. And that's, let's say if we're doing the food cart or the trailer stuff, we have a very thin wall. Let's say we're just putting this on a thin sheet metal wall. Then what we do is we bring that down to have more spring tension for recessed lighting. But realize you have to have standard, I think a little more than a standard stud width on that, but because they assume it's going on drywall, that's how that's going to mount. But it can go on different thicknesses of material, and this will adjust up too, so it can go on a pretty thick. You can actually put that on cabinets. Internal wiring, very straightforward stuff, but remember when you buy these things, what they're not going to come with are the little wire pinchers for the knockout, these things. We can only fit about two into each one, but fortunately this style of light is going to come with multiples. Because as I put these in, we had previously existing cables going along this side for some long lights here. And then what happens is all we had to do is put some stringers out to the side for each individual one of these. They daisy chain together. Very fortunately in this situation we're replacing existing lighting, and by not running new circuits it's going a lot easier than it normally would. And with this stuff all in, we gotta make sure that we're not stressing it, but see where we push that up and I pop that in, and then we give this a very gentle twist as we go in so that we're not binding that wire in anything. And see how there was a little jaggedness in the cut. all of that gets covered up when this goes on. Now, when you're painting this kind of stuff, because this is going to take touch-up painting, where we took down the old lighting and then there was a scorch marks from the old lighting, but again, this was probably 30 years old, maybe even 40 years old. Place was built in the early 70s. So good heavy-duty previous existing wiring. There was no scorching and anything. It was all in really good shape. And if you have any attic insulation up there, even if it's the fire-resistant stuff, you need to have some breathing space around this whole assembly. It's got to have breathing space, and then obviously you don't want to have any flammable stuff in there. But it's got to have breathing space around it when it's set up on there. And so the next one's going to involve this complex wiring. But basically what was done here, and when we get to having more wires go into this is basically a small electrical box that meets code for that. And that's how that'll go. Next little snippet will show this on. And I don't know if I'll show a dimmer switch installation, but we're looking at probably doing a dimmer switch on these things. But this is basically how the can lighting goes. You that two-piece setup, and then make absolutely certain you have all the insulation cleared away from it on the other end. And it very, very greatly helps to have put this stuff in while things are being built. But fortunately, we have access to the attic. Retrofitting a house where that would have been an upstairs up there, and then we're having to feed wires through and all that kind of stuff, it may be something to forego. It may be something that it isn't safe to do. And I see some other people put this stuff in where it doesn't belong because there isn't enough ventilation space for the back side of those lines. But fortunately in this situation there is. And that's basically can lighting, which is relatively popular these days. And I will show in the future, this can go in furniture. There are some ways to do it in furniture, which I'll be doing for a custom bar that I'm building for somebody. So we'll go more into that in the future. Okay, so the way this ended up, we had to make some changes. And my original intent was for the LED lights to provide more lighting here. That's this indirect lighting. And after talking with some of the guys over at some of the Asian people that make that stuff, they really intend for LED lighting to be indirect, decorative lighting. It's tricky to light a whole room with that. So this is the install. Our light came in a little short, so we're going to put an extension over here and come over here. And one of the things that I found, we found the hard way with determining the positioning of can lights, is that the halogen ones, or any of the ones that produce a lot of heat, the instructions say they got to be 3 inches away from any insulation. Well, on the insulation here, which would have been kind of like even spacing with everything in the ceiling, well, there was a joist up there, and it was really close to the joist. So I said, well, let's install it and leave them on for a little bit and see if that joist gets warm, and it did. And so rather than screw around with anything that even might remotely be a fire hazard, we decided to reposition these and rotate it so the wires actually end up in the same position. But remember how that thing was long, so we rotated it so it went in the other position. Of course, I have to do a little drywall work up there. This patch didn't turn out so great, but we're going to let that dry and then go over it again. The ceiling itself is going to get retextured, and I think our texture is going to go on this indirect lighting trough here that I made. Cutting the angles on that was really tricky, but once it's all painted, we're going to go with a brilliant white so that we get maximum reflectivity. The rope lighting came in a little short right here, so we're going to get a longer one and go around. The other thing I want to look into is if I do 2 courses of the LED rope lighting, if it gets a little brighter. But that's so that we have some filler light in the room. And then here we have the Ikea cabinet lighting, which, so I put the switch there. And so that's going to work with that. However, what we're also looking at is custom cutting some trim to match this and going like that, just so you don't see the light. You'll see the light, but not the actual light fixture. So that's kind of how that's going to go. And so this is the way this lighting thing's going to work. But you got to watch out for these little buggers. They build up heat, and you can see where the markings were done and redone with relation to. We did this. I did a test pilot hole, found out there was a joist. I couldn't go into the joist. And then, you know, by default, we went a few inches over just to make sure we're going to miss it. So this doesn't have that heat buildup issue. This one ended up right next to the joist, and that was just too close. So I reversed the position and had to go inboard with it. That's unavoidable. And sometimes on a styling design versus the engineering that has to be done, that's just what you end up with.